What's up, everybody, and welcome to Reviewed. Today we're going to be taking a look at Inscribed from Agus Tjiu and Arif. But before we jump into it, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And please give the bell a ring.
And thank you to MuseumKits.com for sponsoring this week's episode of Reviewed. MuseumKits.com strives to bring you museum-quality prints of some of your favorite artwork into your home. They've recently teamed up with Lorenzo from Stockholm 17 to bring you his award-winning House of the Rising Spades court cards, available on archival quality paper to hang on your wall. Make sure to check them out at MuseumKits.com/S17. Link is down below.
Do it now. Right now.
So, man, I gotta say, this price point on this gimmick scared me off so much at first, but, you know, to address the elephant in the room, but I have to say, I'm really impressed with this gimmick itself. I think coming out of it, Inscribed is basically a master prediction system. It's really straightforward and simple to use, but with a $500 price point, there's clearly a very specific audience for this gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it looked to be a little pricey in the beginning, you know. Once you learn a little bit about its workings and capabilities, I guess you can say, it makes a little bit more sense.
Absolutely.
But, you know, it is what it is.
Dude, I will say, I really thought long and hard about the price point on this. Anyone tells me a magic gimmick's going to cost you $500 and it's not like a custom built for you sort of thing, I'm definitely questioning it. But like you said, going through the tutorial here, and the video includes a 30-minute tutorial, I think it's like 29 minutes and change. They really explain a lot of the capabilities of it, the pros and cons. They go through the whole process. They're a little light on the routine side of it, but really the cost you're getting for this is the gimmick itself and the explanation of how it works. But I think, you know, going into that, and like we had originally said, this is really built out for a very specific audience. And with that in mind, the person who this is marketed towards is willing to spend $500 on a gimmick because you're out there performing in a parlor, performing on stage. You've really got a setup where you are making, hopefully, consistent money in a career working magic, and so this makes sense as part of your repertoire. I wouldn't say that this isn't a beginner-friendly gimmick. It's 100% a beginner-friendly gimmick. A child who has never seen this before in 15 minutes could figure out how to use this, and I say that in the sense of, like, it could also be the first time they're learning how to use a cell phone. They could also learn how to use this gimmick. The real part of it that makes it kind of not beginner friendly, though, is the lack of routine built around it. There is
which jumps it up to like intermediate.
Yeah, and again, I think part of what that comes down to is being a beginner magician, you're focused more on the sleight of hand, the craft itself, the movement, not the things like building the routine, building the pattern, understanding what sounds and doesn't sound natural. With this, because it's not provided for you like many gimmicks provide you for now, you really have to think about, how am I going to interact with the audience with this? How am I going to present this part of it? How am I going to distract them at this part of it? There's a lot of consideration to make to build a successful routine around this, but with that in mind, this is an extremely powerful gimmick for anyone who feels comfortable building that gimmick around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the quality of the gimmick is amazing. It's very, very well built, and it will last a long time if taken care of.
Absolutely.
You know, it's mechanical, so there is, you know, you need to take that into consideration, you know, when performing and how you perform it. But, you know, other than that, you know, it is put together very nicely, and Zoom Magic would be a great place to use this as well.
Which I agree. I didn't even really think about Zoom Magic for this, and a lot of the gimmick and the discussion around it in the tutorial is built around the idea that this is made for stage or parlor. But with the kind of push behind Zoom Magic recently, this would fit perfect for Zoom and really cover some of the, I want to say, angle issues you have.
Cons,
but yeah, some of the cons that really can be addressed in a stage situation. All things considered, this is actually really light on the angle sensitivity for it, because you're in theory, performing this in a parlor or stage where you're accounting for a lot of it. People are sitting in front of you, but all things considered, even if people were sitting around you, there isn't necessarily angle concern for this, but zoom takes that out of the equation almost completely, which I think is really cool. As you mentioned too, I think two of the things to note for longevity on this are, like you already mentioned, the mechanical workings, making sure that those mechanical workings continue to be maintained over time. The other thing though is this also has a battery in it. One thing that I will always caution with a battery is batteries are not infinite. They don't last forever. Usually they have a lifespan depending on the type of the battery. It could be anywhere from 2 years to 10 years. With that in mind, one thing I would like to see, and one thing they didn't address in the tutorial in this, is how to actually replace the battery, or if it's replaceable. They talk to you about how to charge the battery. They talk to you about how the inner workings of the gimmick itself actually function, but the battery and whether or not it's replaceable is one thing that stood out to me as lacking here, and one thing that would concern me at a $500 price point.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, one good thing that they do show is they basically give you everything to build around this gimmick. Obviously you're not building the machine itself, but everything that you use in the routine that you may create comes in the package to build yourself. You don't have to go buy other things to kind of add to the routine, unless you add more elements to the routine.
Absolutely. And I do like the fact that there's actually options included with it as well. So part of the gimmick is a display, which you can clearly see in a lot of the promo material. But the cool thing about it is there's actually two alternative options for the displays. They talk a little bit about when you'd prefer some versus the other. So I really do like the amount of detail that went into building out the gimmick itself and the accessories to the gimmick, for a lack of a better term. I do wish, though, that they had made it a little more beginner friendly by touching on some routines in a little bit more of a fleshed out way. They definitely touch on the basics of the routine, the idea behind what you're going to try and do. Here's where you need patter. Here's where you get an audience interaction. Here's where you have the spectator open the envelope and reveal the prediction. So the cool thing about that is they touch on the framework of the routine. But again, at the price point, I don't know if making it more beginner friendly would have been worthwhile, because I think very few beginners are going to be willing to spend $500 on a gimmick that is very specific.
I mean, very few beginners are ready for parlor magic.
Yes.
So I think thinking about it that way makes more sense, but I think it's a good tool to have, because it is something that you can use over a long period of time, right? And it is something that you can build into your overall routine. So I think as a beginner, if you are going to pick this up for the the $500 price, you're going to have to definitely put just a little bit of work in, like you said, for that pattern and that back and forth.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's something that, and this is one thing I will say about most magic gimmicks, is a lot of times once a magic gimmick sells out, it is hard to find. So if this is something that you think even years down the road you'd be interested in using, it may be worth investing in now. But I would be very cautious of that initial investment unless you do have a specific use case already in mind for it. From a parlor or stage point of view, I think this would be easily incorporated into any existing routines or shows that you may have. An intermediate or professional magician is going to be able to utilize this really easily. The amount of actual interaction on the magician's part is relatively minimal. The technology behind this, I think, is something that's going to continue to be around for a while, so you don't have to worry about the longevity of any sort of required accessories going out of style. All things put together, from a professional point of view, this is a reasonable item for $500. And like I said, based on our initial skepticism, there was a little bit of research into everything that went into this and how much some of those core components actually cost. And even at a production point, I'd say probably 80% of the cost of this gimmick is going into purely production of the gimmick itself. Yeah. So that's a pretty small margin on the actual side of building out the instructional, filming this information, and putting the time and effort into marketing and selling this. So all things considered, the $500 price point, while high, is actually pretty reasonable for the gimmick you're getting.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. Obviously for the wallet, I'd like to see it a little cheaper, but it makes
Yeah.
sense with the price point it comes in.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing I would say too is I think a creative individual could probably build this themselves, but I think your price point would actually be pretty close to that $500, maybe a little bit less, but take into consideration your time value of money, actually spending the time to build this out yourself.
Not even that, but the aggravation.
Yeah,
how much is the aggravation?
Exactly, man. Exactly. So I think ultimately, like, the price point is pretty reasonable for being steep. That being said, I do think this is a gimmick built with this very specific use cases in mind. I do think that you could add a little bit extra flair to it, building out a routine, but I don't necessarily see this being something where you're going to revolutionize what the gimmick is in new ways, using it differently, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's definitely been gimmicks that have been done this way. This is just a different way to do
Absolutely.
it. And definitely smooth.
Yeah, dude. I dig it. I absolutely dig it. So thanks so much, everyone, for checking out this episode of Reviewed. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and tune in next week for another episode where we will be checking out something fun and magic.
Peace.